This is a disclaimer before we get into today's show. This episode was recorded prior to the coronavirus pandemic. So whilst the content is still relevant, there may be a few moments when it'll raise an eyebrow because, of course, this was before we were in this crisis. Enjoy today's show.
Today's episode is brought to you by Checkfront, the booking platform trusted by over 5,000 tour and activity operators around the world. You can start your own free 21-day trial over at checkfront.com.
Welcome to the Tourpreneur Podcast. Travel industry veteran Shane Whaley will take you on a journey with fellow tourpreneurs, sharing their tips, ideas, insights, and success stories to inspire you to make your tour business the best it can be. And now, here is your host, Shane Whaley.
Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Tourpreneur Podcast. You know, I always say we're here to flatten the learning curve for tour operators. That's our mission here at Tourpreneur, and we're going to do that today because we're talking all about registered trademarks. Now, I know this is a topic that many of you have concerns about. I get a lot of emails on this question, and I'm not legally trained, so I can't really answer these. So I reached out to a gentleman called Gordon Firemark. Now, Gordon is an attorney. He does specialize in entertainment law, but nonetheless, he's an expert when it comes to trademarks in the United States. And I have to give that caveat. The advice he gives out today is based on US law, but I think you can, even if you're based around the world, you'll get a lot out of this episode today. And I came to you, the listener, and asked you, what are your concerns? What keeps you awake around trademarks? And should you get a trademark? And how do you go about getting a trademark? And that scary moment, what do you do when you get a cease and desist letter? One of our listeners recently had a letter saying, hey, you were using the term culinary tours. That's our registered trademark. You can't use it. Now, of course, we can all laugh at that and go, yeah, whatever. But there's stress. There's anxiety. It's going to take time to deal with that. It's going to take time away from running, growing, and maintaining your business. So we talked to Gordon about these issues on this episode of Tourpreneur. And I'm very, very grateful that he's given us some of his time today to answer some of these questions. You can find Gordon's website at firemark.com. And I just want to make two things clear. One, do your own due diligence. Advice you hear today is coming from a US attorney. Do your own due diligence as well. Secondly, Tourpreneur is earning nothing through this episode today, because I do talk a little bit about why I wish I had hired an attorney rather than going through LegalZoom. But I'm not making any money. There's no affiliate, right, guys? I'll always be honest about that. If Tourpreneur is going to get a cut, I'm going to tell you. This episode today is all about informing and educating you, our Tourpreneur listener. And we want to do more of these. So if there are areas where you want help and support, we're having the vertical panels, roundtables coming up, like the food tour panel. We're having the tour operator website tune-up. If there's anything else where you need help, drop me a line at tourpreneur.com. We're here to help. And if you can do me one big favor, if you enjoy today's show, please share it with a peer, with a friend, with someone in your network who is looking for legal advice on trademarks, or just someone in your network who you feel would benefit through listening to Tourpreneur. I don't have a marketing budget to promote this show. The reason this show is growing is through you, through the power of word of mouth. And I really, really appreciate that. Okay, enough from me. Let's cross over to Gordon Firemark. Welcome to Tourpreneur, Gordon Firemark. How are you?
Hi, Shane. Great to be here.
I really appreciate you jumping on a call with us, because there's been a lot of questions from tour operators, what we call tourpreneurs, around trademarks and patents. And there's been a couple of cease and desist cases that have kind of been emailed to us that are interesting for us to look at. So I really wanted to cover a couple of the topics that I asked my listeners, look, what's top of mind? What's keeping you awake when it comes to trademarks and patents and everything else? So first of all, one of the questions we got, is it worth it for a small company to trademark their tour operator name?
The short answer, I think, is yes. This is one of those things where your brand name is the thing that will allow you to, well, one of the things that will allow you to grow your business. So you may be small now, but if somebody comes along just as you're starting to gain some momentum and begins using a name that is confusingly similar with your own, that could really undermine your marketing and promotional efforts and slow down your growth. So a trademark registration is an important way of protecting against that eventuality or possibility. And I think I would say it's near the top of the list of things to do on the legal standpoint as you're getting a business off the ground.
So let's say I have a walking tour here in Burlington, Vermont, called Shane's Walking Tours or Burlington Walking Tours. What would be the danger for me if I didn't register Burlington Walking Tours?
Well, the danger is that another competitor comes along and also launches Burlington Walking Tours or Burlington Walking Tours would be the most confusing. Now, that's an interesting issue because what you've stated as the brand is a very descriptive name, and trademarks generally are designed to protect distinctive names. So we have the spectrum of genericness at one end and descriptiveness sort of a little further along the spectrum, and distinctive and coined and fanciful terms at the far other end. Descriptive terms generally don't pass muster with the trademark registration folks until they've been used long enough to have acquired a secondary meaning in the mind of the consuming public. And that's sort of an acquired distinctiveness kind of thing. So there are examples in the marketplace. The National Biscuit Company is a little company we now call Nabisco, but they managed. And Payless Shoes was another example. Toys R Us, and Toys R Us had a distinctive logo. But the point being, you can acquire distinctiveness over time. So step one, I would say, is in choosing the name of your business and the name of your product, choose wisely, choose something a little distinctive so that you don't have the pushback in those early days.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. One of the cases that, and I will not name those involved in this, but someone wrote to me and said, hey, I've had a cease and desist letter. So they run food tours. And the letter said, you cannot use the terms culinary tour. Which, I roll.
The look on my face tells Shane that I'm puzzled by that.
Yes. Now, the thing is, when you're not conversant with the law, it's scary. I always think if you get a legal letter or a letter from the IRS, it's time to worry. So this person, had to hire a lawyer. They sent a letter back saying, we don't agree. That's not trademarked and blah, blah, blah. They wrote another cease and desist. So meanwhile, the meter is ticking. He's paying his lawyer bills because he wants to do the right thing. What would you say? Let's say you were advising this person and they got a cease and desist letter saying, don't use walking tour, for instance, which is very generic. Would you just say to that person, just ignore it? There's no way they can enforce it, or that they should respond?
I wouldn't just ignore any lawyer letter or demand like that, because it's possible that, as I said, they could have some sort of acquired distinctiveness or some colorable claim to ownership of the name or something like that. So I would say step one, maybe before hiring a lawyer is, you can go online and do your own trademark search of the trademark registration database. And while I wouldn't conclude necessarily that you've done it right, that kind of thing, it's certainly worth checking. Obviously, you can demand that they say, well, if you've got trademark rights, prove it. What's your registration number? If they prove it, then you make your decisions accordingly. If they can't prove it, then you have, I think, a reason to consult with a lawyer about your options. There are such things as unregistered common law trademarks and things like that. But something like culinary tours or food tours or walking tour, that's descriptive. And the whole point of this is that we don't want to take these things completely out of the lexicon, because then there's no other way to describe the thing we're doing. So that's why we want to make sure things are distinctive before we can protect them.
Sure. No, thank you. That's good advice, because my advice to him was, I'll just ignore it. They'll never enforce it. But, you're the expert on these matters, so I'm glad to have you on. Yeah.
The risk of ignoring it is really that the other side escalates and takes further action and maybe files a lawsuit. And at that point, now you do have to hire lawyers and defend yourself. Or if you ignore that, you end up with a default judgment against you and you got real problems. I think it's better to, nip these things in the bud as soon as possible.
Well, I'm sure that tour operator concerned who listens to the show is smiling right now at your advice, because that's exactly what they did. And it's ongoing, by the way, but apparently it's gone quiet. So another question we received, there are companies here in Toronto causing confusion because they've named their businesses in a similar way to mine. I'm Tour Guys, and then there's a Toronto and Niagara Tour Guys. Plus, there's a Toronto Adventures, and I'm Toronto Urban Adventures. I'm wondering if I should register and trademark my company name now. As I started out as a man with a van operation, I never did. But as things progress and grow, maybe I should, even if I still trade as a sole trader.
Well, I have to say I'm a U.S. lawyer. I'm not licensed in Canada, and I know the laws are a bit different there. I think this is a situation where it justifies speaking with a local attorney who can advise you. It may be too late to register your trade names, your trademarks there, but you may also, by virtue of long-standing use, have that sort of common law trademark protection that I talked about. If you were in the marketplace for a few years prior to those others coming in and crowding the marketplace with competitive brand, it might be possible to put a stop to it. Here in the U.S., we have state and federal unfair competition laws and things like that. And it's sort of if they knew or should have known that you were in the marketplace under a tour guise, I think that's a pretty good, clever, it's descriptive, but it's a little bit suggestive and more toward that distinctive side. I think it's worth exploring whether you have some argument there. Yeah, consult with somebody, I think, is the best advice.
Thank you.
Take a day off from answering emails, telling your team what to get ready, or manually entering info across sales channels. Actually, take many, because Checkfront will help manage your bookings. Guests book and pay however they want. Your team has the tools they need to operate smoothly, and your calendar always stays up to date. Now, what will you do with all that extra time? Checkfront. One booking platform, limitless possibilities. Find out more at checkfront.com.
Another listener question. I'm interested in learning about trademarking slogans, not just the business. What are the benefits, if any? Is this something we should look at in addition to trademarking the business?
Yes, I think so. I mean, a slogan can be registered. Here's the important thing. Trademark is designed to protect words, phrases, slogans, graphics, and things like that are used to identify a particular goods or services as coming from a particular source. So if you have a slogan for your brand or product that is distinctive, it has to be distinctive, then yes, it's worth looking into registering. Now, of course, you have to be careful that you're not trying to register, use the Force Luke, or use the Fork Luke would be good for culinary tour.
There you go. Marketing advice coming in here as well.
Use the Force Luke or something like that, or you had me at hello, or some common movie phrase or something like that. But if you've come up with a clever, distinctive phrase, yeah, absolutely, explore registering that. Even if your product or service name isn't distinctive, that slogan may be the thing that distinguishes you in the marketplace.
Sure. If a foreign tour company has a trademark and you only use the name in the US, what are the risks?
So trademarks are territorial, but if the foreign mark owner has done business in the United States, then they may have some of those kind of common law rights, and they may also have international rights. There are international registrations and that. So I would be cautious about that. If they were there first, let them have it. Best to stand apart on your own strengths anyway.
Sure. Another question that came in now, this might be a little too travel related, but let's give it a go and see if we can help us with this one. I'm most interested to know to what extent this is necessary, trademarking, to fight back big travel sites from buying ads on your name when you don't want them to. Asking them politely to stop seems to have mixed success. So, for instance, let's say one like Expedia or Booking.com, and they start selling or using Google ads on, Gordon's walking tours. And you're like, hey guys, I don't want you bidding on my keywords. Would a trademark help you in that case? Or, of course, this does depend on the terms and conditions of the travel site you're working with, right? But in general, would that trademark help?
Yeah, there are some, if you have a registered trademark already, I mean, again, doing it after the fact may make it much harder to succeed in getting registered as well. But the timing of things can be an influence. If you already have a registered trademark and your competitors are, as you said, bidding on advertising using your brand as the keywords, that's something called initial interest confusion. And in the trademark litigation space, there are claims based on that. It's not easy litigation and it's going to be expensive. My guess is if you're not competing in that ad space with the keyword advertising, you may not have the resources to do that kind of fight either. But it's certainly worth exploring. And consult with an intellectual property litigation specialist who can advise you on that, because I think it is poor form and unfair trade practices. And sometimes the advertising companies, the Googles and Facebooks and so on, will actually act on their own on those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I've seen it happening where someone's not working with the big travel site and they're still marketing the company's name to get people to look at a walking tour page in LA to see the other walking tours,
Yeah, it goes both ways. The little guy can't bid on Expedia or whatever either. So it's something to be cautious about.
Sure. So, we've heard several reasons why we should look into getting trademarked today on this call. What would you say is the best way for a tour operator to go about registering their name as a trademark?
Well, as an attorney, I would rather that you hire a lawyer to help you do this kind of thing, to get the advice about whether it's registrable, how you can improve your chances of success with things, and so on. It is possible to register using certain online services with Rocket or Zoom in their name and things like that. I'm not a big fan of those. I have my own bias against it. My feeling is, look, if you were walking down the street and you saw a box with a hole in the bottom of it hanging about head height and it said on the side, haircuts $1, would you stick your head in that box? Because I think that's sort of what you get with these online services. You might get a great haircut or you could lose an ear. So it is possible you can also register yourself if you've got the inclination to try to make heads or tails of a government bureaucracy-run website.
They don't make it easy, do they? They don't make it easy.
And it's gotten harder and harder. Actually, there's been a bunch of new rules just passed. The folks in the trademark bar are complaining vocally about one rule that's just come into play. Now you have to put more than one email address into every application. It's just silliness. So, it gets a little tricky and it's easy to get upside down in it. I think, having somebody who knows what they're doing, and it doesn't have to be colossally expensive to hire a lawyer. I'll tell you, one thing is your lawyer will probably recommend running a trademark search. And that is just, let's find out if there's anything out there that would compete before we try to register. Because the trademark office is going to run that search, but by then you've paid all these legal fees and, so don't balk at the search. It's worth the investment.
Yeah, that's good advice. So I did actually go through the LegalZoom process last January, and here's my feedback. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I just thought, Tourpreneur, it's a cool name, it's a podcast, etc. Let's trademark it. And I went through LegalZoom. Not the easiest thing to do. Even their own application was quite tricky. I think it was around $500, but it took a long time. And then I think I was 6 or 7 months in. And this is where I think having an attorney really would have helped, because there was some query within I had to prove to the patent office or the trademark office that this is a living thing. It's actually something that is out there and it's being used. And I looked into getting a lawyer at the time and, very cheekily, I just thought, well, I'm just going to take a picture of my podcast in Apple Podcasts. And it did do the trick. But, that's easier because it's a podcast, I guess, and it has Apple on it. But if I was running my own tour business, again, that's time away from the business. It's stress, right? It's like, am I doing this right? Am I wasting time? Am I wasting money? So I think at that point, I did think, I wish I'd got an attorney to help me out with this. Because
the process is time consuming. It takes a long time from the moment you file the application to get the registration certificate. It could be 8 months or longer. In fact, I would say 8 months is a pretty fast one. Because it's a government agency and they've got to fund themselves they've got to schedule their time. And so the examining attorneys that have to look at these things, it takes them a few months just to get it up to the top of the pile so they can look it over. And then they have their questions and you back and forth. And the back and forth is really where you need the lawyers. But the lawyer who has prepared the application, because we've done this a few times, we kind of can anticipate what that back and forth will look like and hopefully send the things in early so they don't have to ask.
And I'm going to mention something now that you will definitely be aware of, and you might smile, but for those of us entrepreneurs, I wasn't aware of this. So during that process, I believe my request gets posted on a publication or on a website saying this person wants to register Tourpreneur. And then I got barraged by letters. And the first couple I twigged was a con of some kind where they were trying to get you to pay, $2,000. You've applied for Tourpreneur. You need to put, to be in this directory. And the letters look official. They look like it's come from the government. luckily it was $2,000. So it was like, well, I don't have $2,000 to spend on something. I don't know what it is. Maybe if it was $100, I might have just sent off a check the first time, right? But
yeah.
So that's something else that entrepreneurs really need to be aware of, that you suddenly get barred because your name is out there in the public domain.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, these services have searches programmed so that every time somebody files a registration, a few days, weeks later, they will receive this solicitation that looks like a demand or looks like a government required something or other. And, if you haven't used a lawyer who sort of set out the expectations and to whom you can forward something and say, is this real? It can be very, very daunting. And it is a problem that the trademark office and the lawyers that do trademark know about. Unfortunately, we have free speech in this country. We can't just say, you can't send these kinds of messages if they're not really fraudulent. They tend to be a little deceptive or misleading, but not quite crossing the line. And the trademark office does go after some of them, but it's challenging. So read carefully, make sure, look on the outside. The envelope will often have the indicator. This is not an official government communication or something like that. Be careful if you're doing it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in sales for over 20 years. I think I know every racket out there, but that almost got me, like the first couple. And I'm like, okay, there's something not right here. But I can see people, especially busy, tourpreneurs, I have to write a check off for that and do this, etc. So that's definitely one of the pitfalls, I think, of not working with an attorney, is things like that happening. With your practice, would you work with tour operators who are listening to the show today and they're like, oh, flip, I better trademark my name?
Yes, I do. I mean, I'll tell you, my main focus of my practice is entertainment and media law. I work with a lot of podcasters, which is how you and I have come into each other's orbit. But this trademark stuff is the same across the various areas. And I have, over the years, done everything from textile manufacturers and medical equipment companies. And so I'm happy to help out with anybody who and let's face it, tours and travel are a form of entertainment. So it really does sort of tie in and connect.
Absolutely are. It's all an experience for people. So if someone was to work with you in terms of your packages, what's that likely to cost if they want to register their tour operation with you?
My fee, in addition to the government fee, and then actually we should say that there's a government fee in the U.S. of, I believe it's $275 per mark per class of goods or services. And many brands, cross over into multiple classes. So you might have $550 or $800 worth of expense on the government side, the filing fee side. My fee is just under $1,000 for a typical registration. When it gets complicated, when there's a logo as well as a word mark, we have additional fees and things. But it starts at around $1,000 plus the government fees.
To be honest, and we don't have, this is not, I'm not getting a cut of this, dear listener, or anything at all. I really want this to be information for all of us. But I wish now, looking back, that I'd come to you and said, let's do this, because the stress involved, the time involved. And then when I got that letter 6 months in about, you need to prove you're an entity or whatever it was, I forget the legal term. Then I almost went to an attorney, which probably would have cost me the same anyway. So I wish I'd worked with an attorney at the start. That's not to say LegalZoom is bad. I mean, it worked, but I had sleepless nights over it and anxiety, which who needs that on top of everything else?
Well, and you really have to evaluate what's your time worth. You're going to spend probably 2 or 3 hours on something that the lawyer would do in under an hour and be done with it and know it's done right. You're going to spend all that time, wonder if it's done right, have that back and forth with the government. Yeah, what's your time worth for that when you could be either out running a tour or selling a tour or, just paying your other bills and getting things taken care of so you have the bandwidth to do the things that are important for your business.
Yeah, and especially when, I've spoke to a few tourpreneurs who've had this happen to them. They've received that cease and desist letter knowing that, no, I hired Gordon or whoever, I've got this, I've got everything I need. Whereas if I got that letter now, I'd be like, maybe I didn't register in a certain class. Maybe I've messed up here and these guys are right and I can't use Tourpreneur anymore. So I think, again, there's that peace of mind with working with an attorney. Yeah,
I love what you're saying. Keep talking.
Well, no, I mean, I'm talking through experience, right?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe I haven't registered this in the right class. And I mean, you're a podcast expert as well. But I mean, it's that's the worry about doing it yourself.
Right. For a podcast, there are two possible classes, and most people register in the one that deals with entertainment and education. The other one is dealing with recorded, downloadable content. And, podcasts are that, but nobody's putting out records calling them tourpreneurs. So
they're not yet anyway. So, Gordon, where can people find out more about you? And if they want to have a chat with you about getting a trademark registered with you, where can they find you online?
Well, I have my law firm website is at firemark.com. That's firemark.com. And if you add a / and the word trademarks after it, it takes you directly to the trademarks page. But please, surf the site and see what else I'm talking about. I have blogs and podcasts and all that kind of good stuff. And I also have a bunch of products and services for podcasters and other online business owners at gordonfiremark.com, where you can have a survey of all the different stuff I offer. So check that out too.
And I will add all these links for those of you who are at the meeting place waiting for your next tour to start and you're listening to the show. I'll add them at tourpreneur.com/65.
Did you know every weekday Shane curates the most interesting news articles in tours and activities and sends them out in a snappy daily digest? Grab your copy of the Tourpreneur Daily Briefing at www.tourpreneur.com.
Now, I have something else to ask you before I let you go, Gordon. I was intrigued about this on your website. Tell us about the name Firemark.
Well, Firemark, I'm proud to say that my sons and I are the only male Firemarks out there, so we have to continue the legacy. The name Firemark, we believe, was invented by an immigration agent in the late 1800s, early 1900s. My great-grandfather, was the one who emigrated from what we refer to as the old country. We're Jewish, and it's the shtetl in somewhere in Ukraine or Belarus or something. Anyway, when he came over, the story goes that if they didn't get your name pronounced right on the second or third try, they just gave you a new one. Firemark it is. We might be phonetically similar, or it might be symbolic of the kind of work that he did in the old, or his ancestor did in the old country. Maybe he was a lamplighter or something like that. So, yeah, we have a little fun. We jokingly, it's a Native American. No, it's not.
Well, we have a lot of history buffs, myself included, and you have a nice piece on your website about what happened before there were fire brigades in London, etc.
Oh, right, yeah. So a firemark is a noun as well. Yeah, it is a little bronze plaque that would be applied to a building when it was insured by a particular fire insurance company. And that plaque was the indicator to the fire brigade. Yes, put out the fire at this house because the fire brigades were run by the insurance companies. If you didn't have the plaque, you didn't get your house saved.
Wow. Do you know if there's any of those plaques still around in London?
All over. There are collectors who, I don't know if they're still on the buildings there, but if you Google it, there are collectors of firemarks. And my mom has a handful of them arranged in a display on the wall in her living room. So it's fun.
Fantastic. Well, there we are. We've had legal advice, branding, marketing advice, and now a history lesson from Gordon. Thank you very much for giving us some of your valuable time, sir.
Shane, it's been a real pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Tourpreneur podcast. Be sure to visit tourpreneur.com to join the conversation and access the show notes, including links to the resources mentioned on today's episode. This is Tourpreneur.